Amen. Please be seated, and I welcome those who are watching by live stream. Somewhere in the heart of Washington, D.C., there are lined up these exquisite, wonderful restaurants. Each one of them has a central staircase, kind of like in the middle of our chancel here. And it goes up into these fine dining rooms, each of them one after the other. In the evening, when you're passing by there, you can see all of those who are dining in those restaurants. Beautiful, exquisite buildings. Inside those windows, fine white linen tablecloths with beautiful candles on the table, fresh flowers, wait staff milling around. You can see them in the windows bringing roast duck and beef burgundy and the finest wines, and then mocha cheesecake and the like. It's an amazing array of cuisine along this one stretch of Washington. And underneath each staircase, there are people who are on the street, homeless. They watch people walk up the stairs and then walk back down the stairs. I know about one of those restaurants, at least a long time ago, because on the evening that I graduated from divinity school, I was then a Master of Divinity, whatever that might mean. Several colleagues and I went to one of those restaurants to celebrate. What I can tell you that I remember about the meal is that not only was the food and wine exquisite, but we ate far too much, and I remember we drank too much, and we paid too much. And what I also remember is when we were exiting the restaurant, having a marvelous time, there was at the bottom of those stairs a very thin, disheveled, dirty man. He happened to be white. He looked straight at me, and he said, "Excuse me, sir, do you have 27 cents that you can spare?" He said it again. "Do you have 27 cents? That's all I need to buy my supper." There was, as there is now, a long pause. I remember giving him several dollars. I can remember my friends and I, who were masters of divinity, then making our way to our car quickly, putting up our windows, looking straight ahead, and driving across the Potomac River to our campus. Why is it that I remember in vivid detail that story? Even the 27 cents. Because of the parable of Dives and Lazarus, which is our gospel text for this morning. What I realize about that parable is what I realize about all of Jesus' parables. They start off as a window through which you and I view the world. And then they become mirrors in which we view ourselves. It's a stirring and troubling parable that Jesus tells in Luke's gospel for this morning. What do I see about myself when I look into that mirror? Well, I see a bit of Dives in myself. I don't want to see Dives there, at least the worst part of Dives, the rich man. He's self-interested. He's self-assured. He's certainly self-absorbed. And in his self-absorption, he's only interested in what is before him. He cannot see the needs of other people. He's blind to those needs. I have to admit, when I look into the mirror of that parable, I see some Dives in myself. But I also see some Lazarus in myself as well. Those moments in my life, how about yours? When you and I were by the door gate, languishing, in need, empty, desiring nourishment of one type or another. We were not doing well, those moments of being Lazarus. Jesus said there was a rich man who dressed in fine purple and ate lavishly every day. And there was a poor man named Lazarus who was by his gate, who languished in poverty and starvation. He didn't even have the strength to push the dogs away from his sores. When Albert Schweitzer, the great physician and theologian, read this parable, he saw in this parable that Europe was Dives, the rich man where he lived, and Africa was Lazarus at the gate, languishing in poverty and starvation. So he decided to go to Africa and build his hospital. What he discovered, and he wrote this in his memoirs later, is not only he discovered that Europe was Dives and that Africa was Lazarus, but that he had both of those people inside of himself. He thought, horrors. I didn't see the Dives in me, the part of myself that's just self-absorbed and self-interested and doesn't see the needs of other people. And I wasn't at all aware, he says in his memoirs, that I also had Lazarus in me when I was suffering, lonely, distraught, cut off from the nourishment that I so desperately needed. Jesus tells this parable in 3 acts. The first 2 are tableaus. The third one actually has dialogue. The first tableau is on this side of heaven, and that is Dives, the rich man, is in paradise, we understand, while Lazarus is in hell. Dives is enjoying all the bounty of this world in his own self-interest, and Lazarus is in his own hell of suffering and poverty. Notice, though, that both are not described in any type of value. Dives is not condemned for his wealth. Lazarus is not exalted for his poverty. They both are the same in one way. They both have needs. They both ascribe to wanting the best. They both respond to kindness and to unkindness. Act 2 is on the other side of heaven. Their stations of life have been switched. Dives is now the one in hell, suffering and languishing, separated from God and from God's people. And Lazarus is enjoying paradise, presence with God, with Abraham and all the saints of heaven. Act 3 is not a tableau, it's actually a dialogue. Dives, the rich man, is talking to Abraham. Abraham, he says, please come and help me in my suffering and languishing. I'm here, it's a terrible spot. Abraham reminds him that there's been a great chasm that's been set up. Then if you can't help me, Dives says, then please go and help my 5 brothers, because they suffer from the same disorder that I have, this disorder of just wanting things for myself. Abraham declares, there's a great chasm. I'd like to make several observations about the parable and then set forward one imperative for all of us. The first observation is that hell is more hellish if we can see paradise. Lazarus' suffering was more severe because he could see on Dives' table what he needed for nourishment. In like manner, Dives on the other side of heaven, his hell was more hellish because he could see Lazarus enjoying paradise, the presence of God, and life with God's people. The second observation that I would make is that this great chasm, this gulf that's named in the parable, is caused not by Dives' wealth or Lazarus' poverty. It's caused because of Dives' failure of compassion. Chasms are set up on this side and the other side of heaven because of a failure of compassion. Not only did Dives not respond to Lazarus' condition, he didn't even see him. Not unlike my frolicking coming down the stairs 41 years ago and hearing those sorrowful words, "Could you spare 27 cents for me to buy my supper?" A third observation: hell is a state of being. It's not a place. And listen, God does not send us into that state of being. We send ourselves. How do we send ourselves to a place, a state of being that could be called hell? A failure of compassion. When you and I have plenty, when we have resources, when we have a bit of Dives in us, and yet we're able to see the needs around us, and we respond. We become generous. We open up our hearts. We open up our love, and we seek to make life better for other people. When we do that, the chasm begins to close. We begin to see and experience something of Lazarus' paradise. This summer, I watched a very interesting movie. It's called An Englishman Who Went Up the Hill and Came Down a Mountain. I didn't know about the story. It's about two English surveyors who, right before or as World War I was getting started, went to a village in Wales. Because what the village had learned was that if you had a mountain that was at least 2,000 feet high, then the English government would pay for a defense of your village as World War I got started. Well, this village in Wales was convinced that they had a mountain that was at least 2,000 feet. So they hired two English surveyors to come and find out. The surveyors went up to do their work. The people in the village were absolutely sure. In fact, they were already celebrating in the pubs that they were going to have a defense of their village. The surveyors came back down with the news, forlornly said, "I'm sorry, it's not only not 2,000 feet, it's only 984 feet. They were originally cast down, but then they decided we can make a response. What did they do? They each went to their home and got a bucket. Each of them, everyone, got a bucket. And person by person, and bucket by bucket, they carried sand and dirt to the top of that hill and made it into a mountain. 2,000 feet. They were given a sure and certain defense around their village. I thought, how apropos. Frederick Buechner once said that compassion is climbing into the skin of someone else's life. But I ask, how many people's skin can you and I finally climb into? There's a lot of needs in our world. We usually give up or give in or do a little bit because we see so many Lazaruses. And yet, what this village in Wales teaches us is person by person and bucket by bucket, we can make a hill into a mountain. Each day, you and I wake up, we'd have to say in the old Latin, hic jacet. Here lies a beloved child of God who has some dives rolling around in here. There's some moments when we are self-assured, but more than that, self-absorbed. And we need to break out of it. We need desperately to cultivate compassion. And there's a little bit of Lazarus rolling around in us, where we're at some doorstep in need, empty, sinking feeling, and we need to be filled up with God's grace and nourishment. And each and every day, then you and I have the outstanding possibility of getting up then and picking up our bucket, whatever that may look like, and to go get some resources. And person by person and bucket by bucket, we can respond with compassion. And when we do, we experience at least a little bit of paradise. Amen.